Welcome to Silence Kills. We'll be discussing scientific evidence for a creator and other controversial topics. Here's our hosts, Tom Taylor, Steve Bentley, and Sim Climie.
So the fourth topic that we want to talk about when we're talking about science and the existence of God is this subject of a design requires a designer. And everywhere that we look around us, we see design, we always attribute it to there being a designer. Whether it's a painting on the wall that you've never seen the person paint, you know immediately when you see it, you recognize a designer behind it. It was not a random process of millions of years of watercolors or oil colors fumbling around to create this design. There was a person that did that. If you're out in the desert and you stumble upon the Sphinx, you don't think to yourself that a sandstorm over thousands of years created this Sphinx. You know, people created it specifically.
Exactly. Just like this Taco Bell cup with this wonderful cherry Pepsi. It just, after billions of years, somehow it just popped up into my hand, and I can slurp from it. Thank you, Jesus.
I never would have thought about design in a Taco Bell cup, but you're absolutely right. There's design. There's a straw. There's some engineering involved in that cup right there.
Right. There's everything.
Cardboard and plastic.
Everything. I'm talking, check that out. Taco Bell, live mass. Of course, I didn't say it right because I wasn't speaking in
By the time
Spanish.
Sim gets done with it, we'll see the
But there's
law of
information
entropy
on there too?
There's information. We want to hear about your visit. There's the plastic. There's the carbon. There's the what do you call it? The serum or the.
So this is a good example. A simple little cup that is simple, really. It's not very complex.
No.
It's as simple as what do we call this? A cylinder here. There's some plastic in this straw here. But as simple as it is, nobody in their right mind would think that this would come into existence on its own.
Right.
By random natural processes. It would be unreasonable, since we're pounding that word and that thought processes, which could be unreasonable to think this came into existence. Now, a cell is thousands of times more complicated than that cup right there.
Exactly.
Maybe more than that. Maybe it's in the millions. And we're supposed to, when we look at a cell, you guys remember that when we were in school, we always had this test in biology after we learned about a cell. A simple cell is what they used to call this when we were back in school. And we would have to draw. And we would draw the cell wall. And we would draw the cytoplasm. And we would draw the nucleus. And we would draw all these little things that we'd have to identify. And we were taught that this is the simple cell. But now fast forward however many more years, I don't want to say how many more years it is to where we are. The cell, what scientists know now, is beyond complication. They consider it to be like a whole city inside this one little cell. The amount of information in the DNA molecule is just unreal. They say the information in one DNA molecule is like 1,000 encyclopedias. Just in one DNA molecule. But remember, this was all supposed to have come together by natural, unguided processes.
You know, what's interesting about that, you're talking about that too, is first of all, you can go look up a video on YouTube that'll show a video graphic of the cellular structure and the little motors and all the things that's going on, and how the RNA will come in and it'll unzip things and make new copies and then zip them back together and make new stuff, and you're watching all this stuff go on in this video graphic. It's like, it's amazing. When you go back to the beginning of evolutionary theory, they were basing everything on a super simple cell structure, which was basically a wall and some crud and a nucleus, and it magically does everything.
Yeah.
And if it gets much more complex than that, and it's even been said by early evolutionists that if it gets much more complex than that, it throws our whole theory out the door. And that's where more time came in.
Right.
Oh, it's more complex, but that just requires more time. It just means that we have to push back where life started. But we see now, like you're saying, it's so complex. And how does it develop? Why did something develop in the way it did? It doesn't make sense, because the only way, and this is probably going too deep into this, but the only way certain functions make sense is the 27 steps it takes for that function to work. Well, it would only be one of those steps that would have been an evolutionary change to lead towards it, and none of those steps make sense on their own.
Right.
And so you start looking at it, it's very clear this is these machines were put together They make sense. There was order behind it. Somebody caused it and designed it. And life is so much more complex than that. And that's where are you going to have faith that life just happened on its own, statistically, just, enough crap just flew together and the right sparks hit and the right things happened and it just started happening all on its own? Or are you going to look at this and go, no, it's very clear somebody made this? And that's where design theory comes in. Is like it makes way more sense. It's Occam's razor. It's much more reasonable to think that somebody caused this, designed this, put this together. And that's where we get in on that discussion. And the people that want to argue against it just want to keep pushing it back further and further. That, well, no, it was enough time cause it. Well, they're starting with a very strong faith stance that there is no God. And that's a faith position. There is absolutely no God because you can't prove it. I mean, unless you have all knowledge of everything, you can't prove that there's no God. And that's one of the things that's a whole other discussion talking about the God of the gaps, and that'd be something interesting. That's why I love looking at science, because some people want to say God of the gaps. Well, you guys just have a faith in a God because he can explain the things you don't understand, and as we understand more and more, that shrinks, so God gets smaller. Like, no. Our understanding helps us see better and better who God is,
right.
And we start to gain the Apostle Paul talked about it. So you look at his handiwork and you'll see who God is. Mm-hmm. You recognize him more and more by studying that. I'm definitely very pro science because it helps us to understand better who this God is. That's so difficult to know because he's so beyond us. He's outside of everything. So I mean, that's just some random things I'm rambling there, but
I've had this thought. I've actually, long story short, is to believe in macroevolution, because there's macroevolution and microevolution. Macroevolution says, well, one day a fish popped out of the ocean, and then it turned into an ape, and then it turned into a human being, and there's no creator behind it. Well, then what you're saying is that our DNA is God, that it has the intelligence and the ability to change into something else when it decides to. So really, you're believing in DNA, or whatever anybody wants to say, that it is a creator in itself, in a way that, boop, okay, now is the time, this is the right time in history to change into something else. That's an incredible amount of faith, Well,
we're going to get into the evolution theories more down the road, but from the design aspect alone, reasonable, observational, everyday life, everyone recognize design, attributes that to a designer.
Right.
I mean, the people who are watching, just go about your daily life. When you see things everywhere, a stop sign, somebody made that stop sign and it has a purpose behind that stop sign. You open up a book, you read these letters that are formed on that page, and they have a message because an intelligence put them there to speak something to us. There's design everywhere, and it always points back to intelligence and a designer from a reasonable standpoint.
Especially if you look at plants, they take in carbon. Is it carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide?
Dioxide.
Thank you. Carbon dioxide, and it breathes out oxygen.
Right.
We breathe in oxygen, and we breathe in oxygen, and we breathe out carbon dioxide. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So, I mean, for that to happen by chance, that's a lot of faith.
Works nicely, doesn't it?
I mean, that's incredible.
yeah, the balance of creation.
Thanks for joining us.
There you go.
You laugh too soon.
What price?